Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with my most surprising books of 2020. Before we get started, apologies again if you can hear the fan in the background or like ambient noises because I have the windows open. It's our typical random heat spell in the middle of the winter that we get here in California, so I pretty much need to have the fan on and the windows open if I want to film right now, so hopefully it's not too distracting. But yeah, so I'm really excited about this video. I read a lot of really wonderful books in 2020. This is kind of my way of shouting out some books that just really took me by surprise in various ways, maybe because of certain expectations I had going into them, or because of like based on my reading tastes, I maybe wouldn't have thought that these books would work for me as well as they did. Maybe the book itself actually surprised me, like where the story went or what kind of story it was. So there's a lot of reasons that books could end up on this list, and this is my opportunity to kind of talk about some of those that I really loved during the year. So this is not my favorite books of 2020 video, but these are a lot of really great books, and I have quite a few to talk about, so I'm gonna try and go pretty quickly with these. I won't do like in-depth synopses really. Also, these are in absolutely no particular order. I started out doing them chronologically, but then I thought of more I needed to add, so they're just completely out of order now. But the first book I want to mention is The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. This is a historical fiction novel that I still don't hear many people talk about, and I really enjoyed it. Her main character is, I believe, Chinese or Chinese American. I think this is set around like late 1800s, early 1900s in Georgia, which is not a setting, time period, and representation combination that we see a lot, even though there was a substantial Chinese population there. And I just really enjoyed our main character. I really enjoyed the setting and the historical aspect and getting to learn more about this setting, and I think there was some great commentary here as well. I think also if you're somebody who does not always enjoy historical fiction, or you're a little tentative about trying it, this might be a great one to start out with because it definitely wasn't difficult to read. I think the book did a really good job of giving you the historical background you needed without getting too bogged down in details, and there's also like a subtle romance element that I really enjoyed. I found the story in general just very, very compelling, and I really enjoyed this one. I think more people should be talking about that one, and that one was surprising because, like I said, I had really not heard people talk about it, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but I thought it was really good. Then I also have Winterling by Sarah Prinias, and I mean the whole trilogy because I read the whole trilogy last year, and this is a series that I, again, did not have any expectations about really, and I was actually a little bit nervous because I had not read anything from Sarah Prinias before. I hadn't really heard much about her books in general, even though she's written quite a lot of them, and I had bought the whole series, even though it was very cheap. I was kind of like, what if I don't like it? But I really liked this. I think the first book I gave 3.5 stars, but the second and third I gave 4 stars, and this is a series where, because there are kind of like fae elements in this book, or in this series, but something I think is really cool is, I think if you like fae in stories, you will really enjoy this. It's a very like kind of old world fair folk take. Like you can't really trust them, like there's tricks about how you have to deal with them, and they're kind of like the way that they interact with the forest and with like kind of these animal creatures is really interesting. But I think if you don't like fae, you could still really enjoy this because it's very different from, I think, the like typical fae that is coming out right now. Like these are not like Holly Black fae, even though I really enjoy those, like that's not what this series is. So I think this could work for a variety of readers. I really enjoy the nature magic. I really liked, like the second book has like a magical competition element, which I really enjoyed, and that's something that always surprises me, even though by now I should realize that sometimes I do enjoy those elements. I thought the character development was really great too. Our main character Fur, and also this Puck that she develops this really uncomfortable alliance with, and how that turns into an unlikely friendship and everything. I just really enjoyed that. I really liked some of the side characters as well, and I'm really excited to read more from Sarah Prinias. Next on this list I have a very popular book, but I was still surprised at how much I loved it, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. A lot of people were talking about this book and loving this book when it came out, which made me a little nervous in itself because I don't have the best track record with super hyped books. And then also, by the time I got around to it, I had started hearing a few people who didn't like it as much, so then that started making me nervous too. And I also have just had very mixed results or kind of bad luck with the romance genre so far. I'm still trying to figure out like how I can more consistently find things I enjoy, because I have had a few hits, but I think overall they have been more misses than hits. So I was just like nervous in a lot of ways for this book, but I absolutely loved this. I loved the hate to love romance. I loved the fake engagement, fake marriage thing. I really enjoyed the two main characters, Ethan and Olive. I thought the romance was done really, really well. I adored the emphasis on family in this book. Like the romance is obviously a big part, but also family relationships, and especially Olive's closeness with her family, and I just really, really love that. And another thing that stands out with this book for me is something I have mentioned before, which is the dreaded third act breakup that happens in like basically every romance novel now, or like for the last few years, few decades. I don't know how long that's been a thing. But in this book, it not only made sense, it was something that I think needed to happen. Like, if this hadn't been a deal breaker for Olive, I would not have loved her as much as I did. Like, I would have thought a little less of her because of what this issue was. And I just think that the way it came up felt very natural. Like, the fact that, like, yes, this is something they would need to deal with if they wanted to have any kind of relationship. So yeah, I just really enjoyed that as well. But I thought this was really wonderful, and I also read it on a night when I was just having a bad time. Like, I really needed something like this, and this was absolutely wonderful. Next, I have a recent read, and that is I Love You So Mochi by Sarah Kuhn. Or I say recent read, really what I mean is recent wrap-up, because I'm still so behind on my wrap-ups, but I actually read this several months ago at this point. But I actually had gotten this from the library originally, and this was that month where I realized like I was out of library renewals, so I had to either read all the books I had checked out or decide which ones I was just going to give back and not read. And this one I kind of thought about just giving back, like, and you know, not reading it, or maybe thinking about trying it at some other time, because I wasn't sure I was in the mood for it anymore. And I don't know, it was one I had kind of picked up on a whim, even though it had been on my TBR, because I just, like, I don't tend to hear people talk about this one, but I'm so glad that I did read this before I returned it, because I really enjoyed this. Like, I thought this was gonna be like a cute contemporary romance, and some of it definitely was. Like, I really enjoyed the romance element in this book, but it also dealt with a lot of other topics. Like, it deals with complicated family relationships, it deals with the fear of disappointing people that you care about, it deals with getting older and realizing that what you thought you wanted to do with your life is not necessarily what you still want to do with your life. And it also deals with fashion and clothing and design, and how those things are looked down on and treated as something that is not really art, or that it's not really important, and how that's not true. Like, this book shows how that's not true, or that's not right. And I really loved that. There's this one scene in particular where Kimi, our main character, like, she witnesses something that is related to clothing, and it's like an expression of joy, and that scene is just so beautiful. Like, it just was very moving. Like, it moves Kimi and it moves the reader as well, or at least it did me. So I just thought that was really lovely. I think this book did a lot of things really well. I think it's a great balance of sweet and also with some heavier elements, which is something I love in my contemporaries. And yeah, I also, like, this is not like the heaviest YA contemporary I've read, so if you're worried about it being like really intense and draining, I don't think it is, but I do think it deals with some important issues in a really thoughtful way, and I really enjoyed this. Next, I have The Bells by Danielle Clayton. Now, this is one that I remember when it first came out, like, a lot of booktubers were hauling it, or they had been sent review copies, and people were reading it and really enjoying it. I heard overall very positive reviews, but as time went on, like, all of the new reviews I was hearing tended to be more mediocre or mixed, or even negative. So I was pretty nervous. Like, I was not even necessarily thinking I was going to pick this up, but I did end up picking it up, and I loved this. Like, I thought this was so smart and so thoughtful. I really enjoyed the setting and like the fantasy New Orleans like aspect of this book. Like, the descriptions were just beautifully done without, I think, overtaking the story, in my opinion. I really enjoyed Camellia as a main character, and I think one of the reasons that people, like some reviewers, didn't like this book as much is they felt like the social commentary on beauty and beauty standards didn't go far enough. I actually thought this book did a really good job of showing how Camellia is just waking up to the fact that these things are problems, you know? Like, I don't know, I feel like this book felt like a very effective exploration of somebody who is only at the very beginning of getting involved with fighting back, you know? It's like, yeah, she's not like immediately the head of the revolution at the beginning of this book, because I don't think that's what this book is trying to do. I think this book is showing how somebody who is very deeply enmeshed in these toxic ideas starts to realize that these things are bad, and that she is contributing to that, and that she wants to do something to stop that. So I really enjoyed this. Next, I have Queen of the Sea, written and illustrated by Dylan McConis, and this is a graphic novel, and this was surprising because, like, I have a hard time with graphic novels. I just find it very difficult to follow that method of storytelling. So I was a little hesitant about this one, but I thought this was really great. I really enjoyed the art, and I think also the fact that this is a pretty long graphic novel. It's around like 400 pages, I think. I think that helped as well. Like, I think the character development was great. I thought the dialogue and the writing was really good, which again, these are things that I sometimes have an issue with in shorter graphic novels. I thought the story was really interesting. It's like an alternate history of, I don't remember because I read this one a while ago. though. I will put the information on the screen. But it's one of the queens of England who I think was exiled. And I just like really enjoyed the story. I thought the setting was really good. The only thing I thought was a little weird about this one is it's kind of confusing if like how much of the alternate setting has been changed. Like I think the combination of things that the author kept and that the author like changed words on or that the author did differently, I think that was a little bit like confusing at times, but otherwise I really enjoyed this. I would definitely recommend this one. Like I think this definitely counts as a surprise because again I have a hard time with graphic novels and I just really enjoyed this one. I think it was a really well done story. Next I have What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon, and this is a historical fiction / romance, and this is like the reason this was surprising is like the things that I loved most about this book are not what I would have predicted would be my favorite parts, because what drew me to this is the like time travel romance aspect, because I talked before that's a trope that I think can be done in a way that is just really good. Like I think it just like it creates kind of built-in character angst because you have this main character who is kind of torn between two sets of relationships and people that they're close to, and you know, even their lives, like their life in their time versus this different time that they are currently in. And I just think that's a really interesting thing to explore in stories, and so I was expecting that to be the part I loved most about this book. And even though I did enjoy some things about the relationship, the things that really stuck with me about this book is the way that Ireland was portrayed, especially around this time. I think it's shortly after the Easter Rising, and so Ireland is still just really suffering under English rule, and just like the love that the characters have for their country and this fierce devotion to freedom and to independence is just really beautifully done. There's one character named, I think, Michael Collins, also known as Mick Collins, who I had never heard about in history before, and he was like one of my favorites in this book. He was one of my favorite characters, just like favorite elements of the book in general. I just found him so interesting. The way that he feels guilty about the things that he has done in order to get Ireland free, but how he also does not necessarily regret those things. Like, I just think that was done so well. So that aspect was one of the things that just really just stood out to me about this book. And like I said, I did enjoy the romance. I also loved a lot of other things about this book, like the family relationships were really well done. I really liked the writing, but this book was just a surprise for me because the thing that I thought for sure would be my favorite part or would have the biggest impact on me, it wasn't that. So thank you to my friend Olivia Savannah, because she was actually the one who gifted me this book. But yeah, I just really loved it, and it was for different reasons than I expected. Next I have The Water Horse by Holly Webb. This is the first book in a series that at this point that I'm filming this, I have now read the whole series and really enjoyed it. And this is a Italian-inspired historical fantasy series. It's also middle grade, and like this was just such a massive surprise for me because I have never read anything by Holly Webb. I don't think I'd even heard anyone talk about her books before, and again, I was not sure what to expect going into this. This book had actually been kind of an impulse buy. I got it super cheap when I was buying other things. I was like, maybe this will be fun, and I thought it was going to be this like really like sweet, kind of cutesy, like lighthearted kind of read, and it really wasn't. Like there were definitely some sweet elements in this series, but this is a series that really looks at some really dark topics and issues in a way that is, I think, child appropriate as well. Like I was actually very taken aback by how dark some of the issues are and how matter-of-factly these books deal with them. Like this is the first book, and we begin the book with our main character, this young girl, realizing that she has been mind controlled her entire life by somebody that she trusted or who is supposed to take care of her. And the book is about her fighting through that, and realizing that she has let the people in her city down, because she's the Duchess, so she's kind of in charge of the city. And like this book, this series just deals with some really heavy things. Like in book 2, our main character is the cousin of this main character, and she's realizing that her mother never loved her and that she just was using her for political reasons. But there's definitely a lot of hope and like happy parts in these books as well. But I was just really struck by the way these books balance those really fun aspects with the more heavy and serious aspects. Next I have another graphic novel, and that is Rapunzel's Revenge by Shannon and Dean Hale, illustrated by Nathan Hale. So I had heard from a couple of friends who had enjoyed this, so that made me a little more like confident that I was going to like it. But as I've said, I have a hard time with graphic novels a lot of times, but I really loved this one. I thought the Wild West / fairy tale / a little bit of steampunk setting was really fun. I thought the character development was wonderful. I really enjoyed the main characters Rapunzel and Jack and kind of their dynamic, and I also was just really impressed with the writing of this book. Like the dialogue was so funny, and the way that the authors could communicate things like comic timing in speech bubbles was just something that was very impressive to me. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I also ended up liking the art style quite a bit, and I would highly recommend this. Again, like even, like I think if you were a graphic novel lover, you would definitely enjoy this, but I think even if you're not great with graphic novels like I am, I think you could really enjoy this as well because it was one that also worked for me. Next I have Pride by A.B. Savoy. This is a Pride and Prejudice remix is what it says on the cover. This is a modern day retelling of Pride and Prejudice that I think is pretty well known. A lot of people know about this one, and there have been very mixed reviews on it, and I was really nervous because the general consensus seemed to be that the more you love Pride and Prejudice, the less likely you are to enjoy this book. And I love Pride and Prejudice, so I was very nervous, but I thought this was great. I really enjoyed this. I think the way that A.B. Savoy changed certain elements of the original story while also keeping a lot of the social commentary aspects, but also making those things that are more contemporary or more like relevant to the story she was telling was just done so well. Like, this is a book about gentrification, and I just think the way that Savoy took the social commentary on class from the original and used that, but also put her own spin on that, was just so clever and so well done. I also really like Zori, who is our Elizabeth character, and I really enjoyed, like, one thing I really love about this book is that Zori, one of her things she's trying to figure out how to do is to keep her sense of place and her love for her neighborhood and her family while also like doing her own thing and finding her own path. I just love the way that Zori's connection to home and to family was not treated as a negative thing or something she had to grow out of. Like, her journey in this book really shows that you can achieve both. So I just thought that was really refreshing and really well done. I also really loved Zori and Darius' relationship. Like I mentioned, I think in my wrap up, where there's a few places in this book where I'm like, this conflict should have been harder to resolve, but their chemistry was so good that it didn't bother me. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Next I have Somewhere Only We Know by Maureen Gu, and I have a whole spoiler-free review on this book, which I will link down below, so hopefully I won't spend too much time on this one. But basically I was surprised about this one because I had read two of Maureen Gu's books before. One I really didn't like, and one that I liked but didn't love. And I had kind of heard from people that this was like their least favorite of hers, but I wanted to try it anyway, partly because it was partly based on Roman Holiday, which is a movie that I absolutely adore. It's one of my favorites. And I think also going into it, I was prepared for some of the more problematic aspects of that premise. Like there's some things about this book and about Roman Holiday that are kind of related to like keeping secrets from people that I knew a lot of people had an issue with, which is obviously justified. And I think the fact that I went into this book prepared for that because of my knowledge of the original movie and also my love for the original movie, I think I was kind of like maybe predisposed to be more okay with those things than other readers were. And I really enjoyed this. Like, I really loved the relationship. I think even though it's very quick because it takes place over only a few days, that's not something I normally like, but I think that was done in a way that felt so believable, and I just really loved Lucky as a main character. I did also like Jack, and I think that like I think that the reasons he does what he does, it's like they don't excuse what he does, but they make it more understandable. You can understand why a like upper teenager in his circumstances would make these like choices that are going to bite him later. I really loved their relationship. I love the fact that this was set in Hong Kong. I thought that setting was just evoked so wonderfully. I think this book also does a good job of handling like some more kind of underlying issues. Like, this is definitely overall a cute rom-com kind of story, but it also deals with things like, what do you do when you have a passion for something that starts to feel like work? It's a hard one to recommend because I know that this didn't work for a lot of people, but I really loved it, and I'm glad that I gave it a chance. Next I have Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland. This is one that really surprised me in several ways. I was not sure how I was going to feel about this book at the beginning because I just like wasn't loving it. Like, it was fine, but it wasn't wowing me, I guess. But I just really started enjoying this as the book went on. I really liked some of the character dynamics. I liked some elements of the world building. I really loved the way that this book talks about queerness. Like, that was, I think, just such a beautiful aspect of this book, and the way that that worked into the world building, and just like the way that these characters, like, even if they don't like personally understand like where another character is coming from, they care about each other and they like accept them anyway, even if they don't always understand everything. I also want to mention that our main character is asexual, which is obviously representation that we don't see a lot, and I really loved some elements about the ending of this book. Like, I think some of the choices that the author made were just really interesting. Like, there was one big element of this book where I was kind of expecting the author to handle it one of two ways, and the author did something else, and I loved that. I just thought that was a really like great way to end this book. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this one. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it. I know that when like, I know a lot of people were putting it on their anticipated releases lists when around the time this book came out, but I haven't heard a lot about it since, and I really liked it. I think especially if you can like stick it out through the beginning chunk, which not that it's bad, but it just like, I don't know, I wasn't loving it. But I think if you can stick it out past that, you could really enjoy this like I did. Next, I have The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This is a historical fantasy novel that follows Nannerl, the sister of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and she was also a very talented composer and musician, but we don't have any of her work surviving because sexism, and because women were not even allowed to compose music. And this is a historical fantasy take on her story. And I loved this book. I actually buddy read this with Amanda from The Curly Reader and also the musical Bookworm. And like we all three of us really enjoyed this one. And I had heard like this book gets pretty low reviews overall. I feel like most of the people who read this one don't enjoy it. And I can kind of understand why. It's a very odd kind of story. It's a hard one to market, and it's a hard one to, I think, like recommend to people because yeah, it's just like, it's very odd. I think like if you go in and you are expecting like clearly defined like fantasy elements, I think you're going to be disappointed because like the magical elements of this book are not super explained, which is not something that bothers me, but I know other people don't like that. I think also people are disappointed in the ending. And again, I understand that, but I think that the ending for this book, it fits the story, it fits what Marie Lu was doing, like it made sense, and it also like felt satisfying at the same time. I think that the social commentary of this book is done really well, like the way that we talk about what women were allowed to do, like what women musicians were allowed to do particularly, and how that differed from what men could do. And I just like the family relationships in this book are so complex and so interesting, and like especially the way that Nannerl and her little brother like Wolfgang, their relationship is so interesting because obviously Nannerl loves him and she's proud of him, but there's always that feeling of like, why does he get so much more than me just because he's a boy? And I think that those things were done really well. Yeah, so like I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this one because I was hearing very bad things about it, or very mixed things, but I really liked this. I'm just starting to realize that I love Marie Lu's most unpopular books because I also really loved her Young Elites trilogy, which is another one that is not, I feel like gets a lot of mixed reviews. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I know a lot of people didn't, but it worked for me. Also loved the way that music was dealt with in that book. Next, I have House of Gold by Natasha Solomons. I had not heard anybody talk about this book. I think this book was actually on my TBR maybe shelf on Goodreads, so even I was like unsure about it. Like I was not sure how I was gonna feel about it. And I just really loved this. I think especially the first half I really loved. Like the character development is so great, the relationship development was done really well. I love the way that Natasha Solomons writes. Like I just really enjoy her writing style. It was also really interesting to read a book set around World War I that dealt with anti-Semitism, because that's definitely not a time period that we see a lot of work focusing on that. And it wasn't the only focus of the plot, but it was something that our main characters dealt with, and like that the book really engaged with and discussed. And like I said, I just like really enjoyed this. Like I remember one night I was starting it late at night and I was like, I'll just read like a couple chapters. I stayed up so late reading the entire first half of this quite chunky novel. Like I was just flying through it because I was so invested in these characters and their relationship, like this kind of marriage of convenience trope that turns into something more. Like again, the character development I think was done really well. The only reason I didn't love the second half as much is because it was less focused on the characters I was really invested in, and we got into more of the nitty-gritty like war aspects, which is obviously important in a World War I novel. Like I just think we could have had a little bit more of the things I loved from the first half like sprinkled into the second half as well. But yeah, I thought this was great. I will link my wrap-up down below where I talk about this one because there were a couple of things I had issues with in this book that are kind of spoilery, so I don't want to get into those here, but I do talk about them in that wrap-up, so if you're concerned about that, I encourage you to check that out. Okay, clearly this is not going to be a short video because I have been talking so much that I am starting to lose my voice, so we're going to try and get through these last ones pretty quick. I also wanted to mention The Dark Days Club by Alison Goodman. I loved this. This book actually almost made my favorite books of the year list. It didn't quite, but it's up there. It's like an honorable mention. I really loved this one, and this is another one where I had heard from a couple friends who really enjoyed this. Like I know Hannah loves this series, and Aoife from Words of Clover also really enjoys it. So I had heard some good things about it, but I just was kind of nervous because I had read a different book by this author and really hated it. And so even though this was a very different kind of story, I was like a little nervous still. But I loved this. I think this book does some kind of common elements just really, really well. I think this is a great example of how tropes are not bad things. Like they're just story ingredients that can be done well or done badly. And I was just so impressed with the way that Alison Goodman did these somewhat common tropes just exceptionally well. Like, I loved our main character, Lady Helen. I also love the fact that she doesn't look down on feminine things. Like, that's something, like, I think in a lot of historical fiction where we follow a main female character, there's a lot of time spent on, like, how much she hates wearing dresses, or like how frustrating it is that she has to do stupid things like, you know, sew and talk to other women or something. So I love that we didn't have that here. There was also this like kind of brooding bad boy potential love interest, but he was not stereotypical or obnoxious because like he didn't treat the main character badly. Like, he had justifiable reasons for being kind of like standoffish and just like kind of abrasive. He had justifiable reasons for that, but he also did not treat the main character like dirt, like using his backstory as an excuse for that, which I really appreciated. The developing relationship between them is just like so good, like very slow burn. I am just loving it. I am so excited to see where that goes in future books. I also really love the writing and the historical aspects of this book. Like, they were so well done. Like, this is a historical fantasy, kind of paranormal slash urban fantasy. If I read historical fantasy, I like the time period to make a difference in the story, and it definitely did here. Like, I thought the writing was very period appropriate, but also being very approachable and just like very compelling and engaging to read. I think just the historical elements in general were done really well. Like, there are several points in the story where the fact that Lady Helen is a woman in this time period and that there's like certain expectations and restrictions on her, like that actually affected how she had to do things in the plot, which I just thought was like very thoughtful and made a lot of sense. So yeah, I obviously really loved this, very excited to continue the series, and obviously this was a very pleasant surprise for me. I also want to mention The Light Princess by George MacDonald. This is a very short fairy tale that I basically read because, for one thing, I wanted to read more George MacDonald, but the main reason is I absolutely love The Light Princess musical. It's just, I just love it so much. So I wanted to read the story that it was based on, and I was surprisingly just really blown away by this. Like, I think the writing was really lovely and really clever and quirky and funny. Like, it's whimsical and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not to the point that becomes like overbearing. I also think that even though it's a very short fairy tale, it dealt with some like really interesting topics or themes. There's some very interesting things about the way that this book deals with the connection between allowing yourself to feel bad, like to feel like unpleasant emotions as being a necessary part of just like living in the world and having meaningful connections with people. I just thought that was really interesting. The only thing I really took points off for this one is there's like a small section that felt pretty like insensitive. Like, there's like a couple of characters who I believe are supposed to be Asian, and the way their dialogue was written felt pretty offensive. They're not in the story very much at all, so if that's a concern of yours, like it's not like a huge part of the story, but that is something to keep in mind. But other than that, I just was really impressed by this fairy tale, and I'm really excited to read more from George MacDonald. I also want to mention The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This was our Past Classics book club pick for, what month was it? Was it November, maybe? I don't remember, but I will link the live show down below, which was on Julia's channel. Me and Taylor and Julia had so much fun discussing this book, and this was a surprise because even though I was expecting to enjoy it, I was not expecting to enjoy and appreciate it as much as I did. This book definitely deals with some really serious topics and like for a book in this time period to do that and to deal with those so honestly and explicitly was just like very impressive to me. I am very upset on Anne Bronte's behalf that she is the least known and appreciated Bronte sister, because this is my absolute favorite Bronte novel I've read. Like, I like this more than Wuthering Heights. I like this way more than Jane Eyre. I am very upset that she does not get her due. Only two more, you guys. I also want to mention The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is a short story that I know a lot of people, I think a lot of people read this for school and I never did. And this is, I would call this psychological horror, and it is just so creepy and so well done. And the way this book shows how women were treated for things that today we would recognize as like postpartum depression or like anxiety or panic attacks or like any of like a whole range of possibilities, including just being upset about things, like not even a medical diagnosis. But the way that those things were categorized as like hysteria or other things that justified just locking them up, it's the way this book, like the way this story depicts that is just very chilling, very well done. Just a really thoughtful, well done, creepy story, and one that I'm glad I finally read. And finally, the last book I want to talk about for my most surprising books of 2020 is this absolute beast, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This is translated by Richard Peviar and Larissa Volokonsky. Shout out to my friend Julia because we buddy read this together, and I'm still so proud of us that we did this. But I'm surprised because This is another one where I love the Great Comet musical, so I was hoping that going in with that emotional investment would help, which it definitely did, but I'm still surprised by how deeply invested I was in some of these characters and their stories and their relationships, and like, I'll link the wrap up where I talked about this one down below, because there were definitely some mixed feelings there. Like, there were some things I really didn't like about this book, but there were some things that I just loved. Like, there's some characters in this book that I just love so much, and at least one of them is somebody who, based on my experience with the musical, I was like, I don't like them, I don't care about them, and I was like anticipating not being interested in their story, and I was so invested. Like, yeah, just really enjoyed this book. Like, I think rating wise I settled on like a 3.5 stars for this book, so it's not like a favorite by any means, but it's one that I think I'm gonna think about for a long time. Like, this book definitely had an impact on me, and I just have a lot of feelings about it. And considering I was like not sure if I would be super invested in this book, I think this definitely counts as another very pleasant surprise. Okay everybody, so that was my incredibly long, I'm sure, video where I highlight some of my most surprising books I read in 2020. Please comment down below and let me know what you thought of any of these books, if you have read them or if you're going to pick them up, and let me know a book that you read in 2020 that was a really pleasant surprise for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!